Hey, it's a pop-up live Q&A today. Some days I just feel really motivated to come in here and chat with you all. Oh, sorry, there's a gnat. And check in and see what's happening, what's going on. I took last week off to be with family. So it's Monday and we have several questions that came in. So I'm just going to dive right in if that works for you all. I have a couple of email questions that came in and then some women who posted in the chat below. Thank you so much for doing that. If you're here watching live, please give me a like or a heart, post something in the comments so I can see who's here. I will keep my eye on the feed. So if you see my eyes moving around, I'm watching the comments so that I can answer any live questions that might come up. Let me just turn off my phone. I was so eager to be here. I want to make sure I'm all situated. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Jenny Glick. I'm a relationship mentor. And, I host this space here because I have a deep commitment and interest in women stepping into their highest potentials. I know that for many of us, and this includes myself, I spent many years in my own marriage not embodying who I knew I could be. And I told myself this story that's super common. That is, if my husband would change, then I could be a different version of myself. So if he showed up differently, then I could be different. And I believed that for a long time. I invested a lot of money in going to different retreats and therapy and those kinds of things. And, I logged a lot of hours talking about him and what it was that he wasn't doing right. And, now at this stage of my life and iteration and what I know, right, all of us should be changing and growing over the course of our lifetimes if we want to be dynamic co-creators of our existences. I recognize now that I was not taking full accountability for what it was that I was consenting to. I wasn't taking full accountability for how it was that I was showing up. I hadn't created alignment and integrity in myself. And so what I was doing was dropping into this lower emotional frequency and then getting into this tug of war with him, which was usually in my head, right? Not in real life, though that would happen sometimes too. So I would get into this, narrative in my head about how it was that he needed to change. And if he would be different, then everything could be different. And that practice simply keeps us wedded in a place of stagnancy. It's like you're in this emotional eddy. You know how a river can have an eddy on the side where the water is not moving because you're spiraling in a place of non-accountability, of being a victim, of not being willing or able to see how it is that you're contributing to the problem. And I say problem in quotes because I like to say that there are no problems, they're just puzzles, right? So if we can come at it as a puzzle and get creative about the puzzle, things can change, right? So that's a little bit about me and why I do what I do, and am here to help show women to step into their highest potential, because when you are embodying your highest potential, everything changes. Everything changes because you're the center of this wheel around you, right? Family, children, civic volunteer activities, work, entrepreneurial endeavors, whatever it might be, right? You're at the center and you up level, the entire system does. Right? So this isn't about fixing your marriage, and it's not about changing your husband. If you want to do that, you can go find something else. Okay. But if you're at a place where you're willing to take 100% accountability of yourself and your power, you are powerful enough to create the situation that you're in currently. What if you were to now align that power to create something that you would prefer if you don't prefer aspects of your relationship? Right? That's the big question. And for those women who do, they step in and work with me, and the sky's the limit, right? The only limitations are the ones that you put on yourself. So with that, we are going to start with Misty's question. Thank you so much, Misty. You all can pop in the Facebook group to read all of the specifics about her question. But at the end of the day, the long and short of it, this is a parenting question. We had 2 parenting questions come in. So I'm going to read you sort of highlights of it. That she's been planning an overnight trip out of town for a big football game with her and her husband and some family, and her childcare has fallen through. And so now she's left in this place where she's trying to figure out childcare for their 2 young children, while the assumption is, it sounds like, Misty, that your husband gets to go to the big weekend away, and that if you can't find childcare, that it's going to be your situation to deal with. And so there's a lot of resentment coming up. So I'm going to quote here, Misty says, but on the inside, I'm enraged that I'm doing mental gymnastics to figure this out. And if it doesn't work out, I don't get to go. My thoughts are, why is it an automatic yes that the guys get to go? And that if anyone sits out, it's me. My non-negotiable is my kids being safe in my absence. My tendency is to sacrifice. And now I'm thinking maybe I should just stay home with the kids and solve this problem. And she goes on. Her questions are, so how do I tease apart? Is this just a normal sacrifice that comes up with parenthood? And I have to embrace that. Am I being a brat, or am I being a martyr and believing it's all on me? The fact that the resentment creeps up makes me want to pay close attention to how I handle this. What's the boundary work here? So I know many of you can relate to this. So if you can, hashtag Misty, right? So yeah, I know that this isn't uncommon. I know we went through this when my son was young, and we were in, straddling different worlds of activities and parenting. So part of how I do the work that I do is to always pay attention to those first feelings that come up, right? So obviously the first feelings that might come up might be disappointment, anger, frustration, this sense of like, oh man, seriously, I had this all worked out. I planned the whole thing. Feelings are normal, right? One of the things that I guide the women who I mentor around is how it is that you get to have all your feelings. Your feelings matter. We have loads of feelings. Your feelings are different from your emotions, right? Your emotional state is the state that you choose to live in. Your feelings are like weather. So the weather changes and you get to have them. Anger is allowed. Anger has power in it. Anger comes forward. Misty, when you say you were enraged, anger comes forward and it's like, no, right? It's decisive. It says, this is not okay. It's important for us as women to access our anger. We get to have our anger and we get to be responsible with it, right? There's a difference between having your anger and then destroying other people with your rage. I'm not advocating the second part of that, right? When we recognize as women how powerful we are, we also need to become sober to what it means to be so powerful that we can burn shit down, right? And so allowing that anger to come up, that informs you, oh, something needs to change here, right? Okay, this is cluing me in that something needs to change. Super important. So first, have your feelings. Feelings are great. And Misty, it sounds like you're having your feelings. You're allowing yourself to have your feelings. Beautiful. Next, recognize, what is this showing up in my system, right? It's the beautiful path of life. And again, this is part of the perspective that I offer the women who I mentor, is to back way up and recognize we're not racing anywhere here, right? Because on the backside of this is death, right? In this physical body. And depending on your spiritual beliefs, who knows what happens after that. But to imagine that everything should just go smoothly is a fairy tale. Excuse me. Because that's not how it goes. How it goes in life is in this incarnation on this planet, we get stretched. We get faced with obstacles over and over and over again. And those obstacles will show up: rage, anger, irresponsibility, how it is that we're unwilling to take accountability. And when we allow the situation to be this light that shows up what's going on in us, right? Then we're situated to grow, right? It's why I sometimes say in here, your marriage is your ashram. And ashram is a place to spiritually grow, to grow as a human being, to become a higher version of yourself, right? People go to ashrams to sit and meditate at the feet of a guru in order to illuminate themselves. To become more illuminated means to hold more light. To hold more light means to drop the low energy frequency of shame, guilt, contempt, right? What that darkness that prevents us from being light. And when you are light, it doesn't mean you don't have anger. We live on this planet. There are a lot of things that you might feel anger about, like not being able to go to a football game. Totally fine. You can still be filled with light and have anger, okay? So, feeling your feelings, what you're doing, recognizing how this situation is showing up something in you. And Misty, what I would suggest, and again, I do this with the women who I work with, is to look at what are the beliefs that you have. And you shared many of them. One of the beliefs is that the guys go and you stay home. Wow, that's interesting. Is that an agreement that was written down in your marriage vows when you all, said I do? And, I'm seeing this glare in my glasses and it's bothering me. So I'm going to move those. Here we go. And so I suggest that now I look like an old lady. I am kind of an old lady, but that's all right. So I suggest that you look at what are the narratives, what are the beliefs in my relationship, and how do these need to be shifted, right? So what needs to be shifted? Like, do I need to stay home? Do I want to stay home? Maybe you want to be the one to stay. Maybe you don't want to go without your husband, right? So pay attention to what the beliefs are, the agreements, the unspoken agreements. What I noticed in your question too, Misty, if I caught it correctly, is that there are some solutions here where you could pay a family member to watch your kids, but then the guilt comes up. Ladies, let's pay attention to the guilt that comes up, because when guilt comes up, it's like, oh, I don't want to ask this family member to do this favor or this thing for me, even if I'm paying them, because it might be a burden. Part of sobriety in our relationships, and I use the word sobriety because most of us are codependent. So becoming sober to your codependence and recognizing, and really cultivating relationships with other adults who can say no. It is healthy for an adult to say no. And if you're asking your sister-in-law to watch your kids, she gets to say no. And you get to have an adult conversation with another adult where you trust that they will say no, or you're really explicit about that because maybe in the past you haven't done that for each other. You've said yes resentfully, or maybe talked behind somebody's back, right? Like how we can do when we're not being our highest potential. And so noticing that there's something in there where it's not okay for you to ask for what you want or what you need, or if you do, it's somehow selfish. Lots of women have these kinds of narratives rolling around in them. So really important for all of us, right? For those of you who maybe don't have children who are listening to this, it's relevant for you too, right? If something comes up with the house, who's taking time off work? Who's going to be responsible for, holiday cards, for the emotional work of the extended family, whatever it might be? And if there are things that come up for you where you feel resentment, that resentment tells you that you're not setting a boundary, right? So this isn't about shame on you, you're not setting a boundary. This is about you becoming more illuminated, you having more light. When there's more light, this is the role of a mentor in your life. This is what I do, is to help shine light on parts of you that otherwise you couldn't see, right? And so when we have someone who walks with us through a path of transformation, she can shine light where otherwise there would be darkness and confusion. And when I feel confused and I'm left to my own, thinking and my own feeling lost in my old narratives, my 1.0 narratives, that's a recipe for going down the chute, right? So I hope that that's helpful. Misty, check in with us after this and let us know. I'm going to go to the second question, which is similar as well. Oh, and it looks like Jessica said this definitely resonates, which is awesome. So glad, Jessica. This is from Katie. Katie says they have some major differences in parenting styles and beliefs about the roles of parents in the family, how to work through the differences when it means I am most often the one engaging with our kids and therefore not able to sit and relax on vacation. Right. Not uncommon, right? She went on to say their kids are 6 to 12. She stays at home. He works full time and works a lot. It sounds like we just got back from a camping trip where he chose to sit in the campsite instead of going fishing. Okay. So how many of us in here know what that's like, right? So again, agreements, boundaries, these are things that marriage invite us to get really clear about. One of the sort of obsessions I have is around language. And one of the things that we don't do as women, we're not really trained to do this, is to use our voice to be very clear about creating the world that we want. It's like casting a spell. For those of you who are Harry Potter fans, you know that there was power, right? And when they would hold the wand and say the spell, and if they didn't say the spell in the exact way, they couldn't produce the thing, because your words matter, and that conviction and that knowing matters. And it's the same in marriage, that if you are not explicit, and explicit doesn't mean demanding, belittling, being resentful, sulking, all of those lower emotional frequency things that we can do, right? If we're not clear with our expectations, then we can't expect to pick up the wand and like create the life that we want when we're like, well, fine, I guess I'll do that. You mean you're going to do this? I can't believe you're doing this. How come? Right? If we're in that state of that tug of war, of that lower frequency, that resistance, right? When we're in resistance, we're annoyed, we're frustrated, we're angry, which is very different than when we're in a higher frequency state, which is acceptance and love and clarity and boundary and curiosity and willingness to collaborate. I use the word collaborate a lot with the women who I mentor in my programs. I like to think about collaborating to create the life that you want. If your partner works outside the home full time, and what was interesting, Katie, as you said, works crazy hours. Yeah, if you're the full-time mom, you work crazier hours, right? So you both work crazy hours. Your time just looks really different, right? So you both are contributing to the family 100%. And it's not about, in my world, negotiating. It's about collaborating the life that you want and designing it. Most of us don't talk about that. We have these assumptions about what the roles will be, or we're afraid to say it. And so we don't, or when we do, we have an argument, and that invites us to just pull back because it requires a lot to sort of step into that version of you that has the equity that you would want in your relationship. Part of this includes, Katie, the importance of you being what I call pleasure ready. Okay. Most women, especially women who are full-time moms and doing that whole thing, are crisis ready. So you're ready for like the kid falling out of the tree, the bike crash, the principal calling, like you're planning 30 steps ahead. And so you're always looking at the things to do, right? In order to be more efficient. So we get very trained, for some of us who run a little anxious as moms, we're crisis ready. So we're ready for that crisis and we're trying to prevent the crisis all the time. That's very different than being pleasure ready. If I'm pleasure ready, the dishes need to be done. The camping stuff needs to be unpacked. I'm going to sit down and have a glass of tea and enjoy the sunset because I'm ready for pleasure. That's a crazy talk right there, because right in the head, what's going to happen? Who's going to do the dishes? Right? And so really playing with, am I really ready for pleasure? And I get it. It may be that it is your job to unpack all the camping stuff. And you think to yourself, I want to go to bed. I don't want to sit here and watch the sunset and have a glass of tea. I want to finish the dishes and get the laundry in so that I can do the next thing. I understand that, right? But part of being a co-creator in your life is recognizing if you want more free time, if you want more pleasure, you get to start saying yes to it. And saying yes to it when it might be really inconvenient. And then notice what happens. You know, when you sit and enjoy the sunset, not in a resentful way, so that when your husband comes in and you're like, well, I'm enjoying the sunset, but I don't know who's going to do the dishes, right? That resentful thing. It's such bigger work, right? So it's why in here you all hear me talk about this is shifting your identity, because I don't give tips and tricks. That doesn't work if you're staying in your identity of being a victim or being a 1.0 self or being somebody who wants to engage in a fight or being somebody who wants to be more committed to the problem than the solution. If you're in that, what I'm saying is not going to make any sense to you. Okay? Because what I do is move you from that 1.0 version to your 2.0 version. Actually, I don't move you. I walk you, you move you, because you have 100% power to do that, right? So that you can be the woman to start crafting the life you want. So if you want more pleasure and downtime, you get to start collaborating with yourself to make that happen. You get to have conversations with your husband that might be incredibly uncomfortable, right? To stretch into that, because a woman who has pleasure, appreciation, gratitude, free time, the kind of collaborative communication that she wants, she's showing up very differently, probably, than how you are right now, right? That means her thinking, her feeling, her doing, and her believing are different. And that's what I teach in my 8-week experience that I do. You have to change that whole identity, because what happens is we get stuck in this place of resentment and annoyance and frustration. And then I'm like, I want something different. So that's the identity, is I don't have it because I want it and I can't get it because he's doing this, she's doing that. It's not going to change. And we're waiting. And that creates more of that. That's just how it works. It's the funky thing about changing your life. You have to become the thing first. You have to become the 2.0 woman, the woman that is pleasure ready, before you're ready for it. That sounds crazy, but it's true, right? So you start coming into relationship with your relationship in a new way. And that starts with you. So I hope that's helpful, Katie, for you. I have a couple of additional write-in questions. One from Carol. Carol asked, I understand what you mean about my relationship being a mirror. I see that I do not love and take care of myself well, and that this is more of the problem, and a workable problem, than any failing of my husband. Love that, Carol, that you recognize that. But let's say I do take consistent steps to take care of myself and love myself more by feeding myself spiritually and adding time for tranquility and exercise. How do I invite him into this with me? Can you give an example of what it looks like with specific words or actions? Yeah. So Carol, I suggest that you simply say what you mean. So simply say, I would like to invite you to enjoy the sunset while we walk the dog tonight. I would love to spend the evening with you, taking a walk or enjoying this puzzle or having a conversation about X, Y, or Z. Or, it's, and notice in my words, it's different than do you want to go for a walk, right? Do you want to go for a walk? No, I don't want to go for a walk. I would like to invite you. I would enjoy your company. I've missed you today. I love you. I say this a lot. The women who I mentored, you've heard me say this a million times. I love you. You mean the world to me. I would enjoy having time with you this evening. I've missed you. I really love it when we sit on the couch together. I would enjoy having a conversation with you. So allow it to be vulnerable to invite him in. Sometimes I suggest to couples that they do a book club with your partner, and you choose a book one month and your partner chooses a book another month, or every quarter, whatever you want to do. And then you have a discussion about it over tea or coffee or wine or whatever your thing is, right? So it's about imagining that you didn't maybe live together, and in having that invitation, right, for your partner to dip into you, and then you practicing that curiosity to dip into your partner. So great question, Carol. I hope that that's helpful. And Yvonne sent a question, and I want to be clear because Yvonne mentioned in her question that her husband gets really frustrated about her negativity and that he yells and throws stuff. And I want to be super clear here in case anybody is unclear. It is never okay to be in a relationship if you are not physically safe, right? And arguably emotionally safe too, because that matters. And so boundaries are really, really important. So much of what I teach in this space is what I think of as higher level stuff. This is not the typical like therapy tips and tricks, go on a date night sort of stuff. I work with women who are interested in going really spiritually deeper, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to have a religious practice or a spiritual practice, but that there's an evolving that you do when you start recognizing that your life is and can be a spiritual practice for you. And it can grow you. You can change tremendously in your relationship. It's incredibly hard to do spiritual work if we're not safe, right? It's hard for me to practice the highest version of myself if somebody's throwing things, raging, flipping furniture over, calling me names. It's one of the reasons why I stopped doing regular therapy work is, it's not uncommon for people to come in when they have those kinds of issues, which is great. That's what couples therapists are there for. But what I've come to know is that there are lots of people who do that. So go find somebody who does that, right? What I do is more refined because I want you to know you get to have a relationship where you are not in danger. And if you're still sorting out if you deserve to be in danger, then that's more like therapy work. And that would be important for you to work with a therapist to help you go through that. And a lot of the women who I've worked with, I mean, myself included, I was in therapy for a long time, not because I was in danger with my husband, but for other reasons, because there are a lot of things, trauma, right, to process, and that I am enough and that I don't deserve to be with someone who's unsafe. That's what therapy is for. That's fantastic, right? I work with women when they've done that work, and then they get to a place of deepening where their relationship actually probably looks pretty good on paper, right? And their partner's a really good person, but they feel like they're missing something, or they see that they're dropping into an unhealthy version of themselves. And so some of what I say, Yvonne, maybe doesn't make sense, right, to you. I'm not sure. But I would really suggest that if you're in a situation where you're not safe, where you're not sure if you deserve to have safety, to find somebody who you can work with in order to get that piece, right? Really clear for you. Because, although the women who I work with have all their stuff, right? Like all of us that are coming in, there's a real clarity around safety, physical safety. That piece is foundational, right? We can't go deeper. I can't do sort of deeper transformation work. It's like trying to have a yoga practice when there's, somebody raging in your yoga studio. Like you got to clear the space first, right? But I do want to address aspects of what you're saying. Okay, beyond that, I just wanted to make that big disclaimer. So I hear that your husband wants you, Yvonne, to be more positive. I understand that. And hopefully you see that your husband, if he's raging, right, and frustrated at you and throwing stuff, he is projecting sort of his stuff onto you, right? You go on to say that your negativity feels so ingrained in your personality, given that you've been practicing it for many decades, and that even though you want to be a positive, you don't know if you can change this trait in one instance. You can change anything. Your belief is everything. So if you believe that you can't change it, you won't. And that's fine, right? Beliefs create everything. Literally so true. I have a client who I'm working with right now, and she has been with her husband for a decade and a half, and they've had their marital problems, and she finally got to the place where she drew a line in the sand. She got really clear with herself and unhooked from sort of where he wasn't showing up in the ways that she wanted to have a relationship with him. And she set a really clear boundary with no attachment to the outcome, right? No attachment to the outcome. And he changed overnight. He's about 2 or 3 weeks in the change and is staying consistent. He changed a behavior pattern that he's been struggling with for 15 years overnight because he decided that particular system, that boundary that she set, which wasn't a threat or a coercion, there was so much clarity in it and not stickiness around it. That part's really important, not being attached to the outcome. So I've seen people, change all the time. I used to have clients when I worked as a traditional therapist say, how long is it going to take? And I'd say, as long as it takes you to decide to do something different. So if you believe that you can't change, you won't be able to. The 4 things I talk about all the time that need to shift in order for you to have an identity shift are your thinking, your feeling, your doing, and your believing, right? Because if I believe I can't change, then I'm not gonna. And then further, Yvonne, you write, I don't know that I can change this in one instance. Well, so just noticing, with our beliefs, we say things like that all the time. Well, I'm not going to change overnight or in one instance. And how it is that we stake a claim around what can't happen, but that's a 1.0 identity. The practices in our 2.0 identity is how to stake a claim in what can. Who would I need to be? These are powerful questions that I teach my clients. Who would I need to be in order to change in an instant? What would I need to think? What emotional state would I need to be in? What would I need to do? What would I need to feel? That's the question, right? Not, do you think I could change in one instance? So I hope you all hear the identity shift here, right? That's what you're doing. If you are up-leveling yourself, it's a big identity shift. She goes on to say, should I go back to my husband knowing that the old conflicts can arise? I'm terrified, and I also don't want to throw away a marriage of 30 years. Again, this sort of thinking is very common, and it's 1.0 thinking, right? I'm terrified because I don't want to throw away a marriage of 30 years. So we're making a case to stay in the comfort zone. You will never change in your comfort zone. And I'm not saying that you should get a divorce. I'm saying the comfort zone of being in this place of like, well, I'm afraid of this, therefore I'm not going to do that. And when we learn how to live more in the possibility, what am I willing to get uncomfortable for? And start asking ourselves more powerful questions rather than spending so much time harvesting a life from what we're afraid of or what we think won't change. Your ego structure is going to want to keep you in your 1.0 identity. I don't want to throw away a marriage. I mean, even those words that we say, it's so from this, culture. It's not you. It's like the programming around you, right? We say this all the time. I don't want to ruin the family. I don't want my children to be messed up. And to really come back to, what if I were to speak from this 2.0 version of myself a little bit more? I know that I am capable of creating an amazing life if I were to be willing to align my power with what it is that I want. Who would I need to be to have a healthy marriage? Who would I need to be to learn how to set boundaries? Who's the woman who shows up with clarity and decisiveness, right? That's where I want your attention to be, not looking at all the problems and all the places where you're not going to be able to achieve your outcome. And that is super addicting. And it's where most people, I would say 90+% of people, will live their entire lives, is arguing for the problem because it's terrifying for your ego to leave that identity. Because when you're between your 1.0 identity and your 2.0 identity, what's happening? When you're in between that, it's unknown, it's uncertainty. We do not, as humans, like uncertainty. So we just want to know, where's the pill? Where's the answer? So I can feel certain again. What I can feel certain of is I'm going to be terrified if I leave. So I'm just going to stay and maybe be miserable. I'm not now talking about you, Yvonne. I'm talking in general because I've worked with couples for 20+ years. So I know this is how it goes, right? It's too scary to leave. So I'm just going to stay and then I'm going to nurse my misery, which is okay. It's not how I want to live my life. And I work with women who are equally terrified to choose this other thing. Like my client was pretty scared about setting the boundary with her husband. And she also, that fear had turned from fear of him leaving or destroying their family or all of those normal things that people say, typical things that people say, to a real recognition that if she did not start showing up differently, that she was never going to have this 2.0 version of her life. And she was unwilling to keep herself in this emotional prison and to keep her, emotional tendrils all wrapped up in her husband and how he wasn't doing A, B, and C. So it's an uncommon woman who does the kind of work that I'm talking about. It is not for the faint of heart. It's for women who are really invested in learning how to be so sober in their lives and have so much resolute love for themselves and to feel fear and to tap into the anticipation and to stay focused on their vision and to do it anyway, right? And it's why I suggest that you don't do it alone, because you don't need to. There are other women out there doing this at the same time. I really hope this has been helpful for you all. I am right now enrolling in my September cohort. So if you're listening to this and you're wondering if you're a good fit, I'm going to put a link to the application around this video so you can check it out. And it's an 8-week intensive experience. I don't love the word intense because it's intense, it's gritty, it's good, right? And it's what we need, because to go from 1.0 to 2.0, like life comes up, right? Like parenting difficulties and challenges and wanting to know different words. Like, Carol, your question is such a good one. I've had many women say, I just don't know the words, because we're so scripted in how it is that we've been communicating with our partner that we don't have the words anymore. So if you're interested in learning more about that, contact me, fill out the application, and we can chat about it. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Bye.